Thank you very much, Sophie. Please don't go too far because I would invite all the corporate speakers to come on stage for the roundtable. Just the time that the scene is set up. As you wish. Vas-y, vas-y. Ouais, encore une chose, c'est bon, on est bon. So thank you very much, and we have the pleasure to welcome Lennig Pedron, head of the Trust Valley. Lennig, since you didn't have the chance to be on stage beforehand, can you just take a few seconds to present yourself, to present what you're doing in the Health Valley?
Yes, thank you so much. So the Trust Valley is an ecosystem. This is a private-public partnership dedicated focus on digital trust and cybersecurity. And we were founded by the state of Vaud and state of Geneva, and about relative to academic institutions too, and key leaders in the private sector. And we are aimed in program really based in cybersecurity and digital trust, and also we have two key and flag program relative to startup, Tech for Trust, and also a program relative to SMEs.
And you're launching, or you're in the process of launching a new accelerator, a new session of the acceleration program. Can you just say a little more about this? And you have an event also in a few days about it?
Yeah, the Tech for Trust is an acceleration program dedicated to startup relative to Tech Forever. It was the first one created by EPFL Innovation Park, the foundation. And we boost some startup to go to the next level on cybersecurity and digital trust. And for example, the winner of the season 2 was Infair, who was on stage just before us.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to ask a question to Sophie. I read in an article that basically among all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, the ones, unfortunately, in who the people would have the less trust are the insurances. So it's a US study. Can you comment on that?
Yes. So the statistics are very different by country. And the health system are very different by country, so the trust in the system and in the different actors of the system is very different. And the trust also varies depending on the question you are asking to the customer. And for example, we made a study last year when we asked customer which information sources do you know and do you trust to choose and regarding the quality of hospitals? 53% answer health insurer. So this is higher than patient and consumer association. They have 40%. And this is much more than H+, the Swiss Hospital Association, with 23%. So really depending on the country, on the topic. And I think that in Switzerland we have a quite good foundation. We have to build on it, we have to work on it, but we have this quite good starting point, especially when it comes to do a recommendation for a healthcare provider.
Okay, thank you. Continuing on trust in the ecosystem, Antoine, you're used to work with big corporations, and when you do your trust analysis, like who is the forgotten guy to whom people don't think of, and which are the ones who will block the engagement or the adoption of new technologies, digital technologies in the healthcare system?
I would say, as I mentioned during the talk around the healthcare professional, I think that's a big topic. But there is a reason for that, is that when you come from a pharma or medtech, you cannot address yourself to caregivers like that, because there is conflict of interest. And that's where it can be interesting for them to work with innovation partner like startup or third-party partner like insurance. So we are trying to, in our daily work, open a bit their scope and try to have more partner. And that's also something important which is forgotten, is the fact that the patient will eventually use 1 or 2 digitalized technology in the end, not 10 or 15. So all the actors need at some point to work together on one or few solutions.
Okay. One of the questions also I had coming from your presentation is basically the need for standards. Who is the main driver from your experience to establish the standards in the industry? Is it like the public sector, or is it the companies? Arnaud, do you have an opinion on that? Please take the mic, yes.
I think the trendsetters are generally in the industry, and from what I've seen, and followed by government policies recognizing the standards. This is what we have seen, for instance, in the Continua Alliance, which was an alliance between industry participants to define the standard for exchanging data on mobile devices. The industry took the lead because no regulators were going to do that. You see that also in fields that are unregulated, like, for instance, in the US, the distribution of medical cannabis or recreational cannabis will have to be led by the industry, because the FDA will not regulate on that. I think in many fields, the industry needs to be the standard setter and set the trend.
Okay, thank you. Christian, do you want to comment on that, or?
Yes, of course, because I was the one who raised the issue that there is no standardization, or there is lacking standardization, especially in healthcare. I think we have industry collaborations like healthcare language level 7, HL7. We have governmental approaches, setting the scene in the electronic patient dossier here in Switzerland, and setting exchange standards. And we have the one I already mentioned, the FHIR standard, which might be the most flexible one and the most successful one in the very near future. But today are not all providers or suppliers are able to talk FHIR. Especially the older systems are lacking this. And from the perspective of the Swiss nation, I would strongly recommend that we get a little bit more standards from the governmental side. Otherwise, we will never come to a level where the data exchange between different providers is in an area where we really can use the data to improve patient care.
Thank you. Jan, are you facing standardization problems?
I think standardization is really depend on in which area. There are things where we need the government support. We see this a lot of, when you see a lot of innovation, then you have a kind of Wild West, and then the government have to set the rules, and this is important and this helps. I think standardization also brings a certain trust. We talked about this one. I mean, I can say GDPR for us was a big pain. So $100 million pain to make this happen. Mm-hmm. But it is so important because this generates trust. And this is the thing is then, because then this helps us to have this kind of trust. And when I come back to what you said, Sophia, I was surprised that many people trust their health insurance. We made a completely different experience about this kind of privacy is level or is a perceived security is also very important. I hear quite often we are working a lot with insurances and health insurances together for prevention. And I hear this quite often, especially in Germany, where customers say, oh, I don't want that my health insurance see the data. I say, why? And this is a kind of fear, which is a feeling about. And when you then talk about them and say they know everything because they pay everything, and if they know the data, it helps to go in the prevention, it helps them. But this is a thing which needs education and a lot of things, and we should talk about the privacy, the security, and the trust, but trust is a thing which needs to develop and is also a kind of perceived security.
Thank you. Arno, you wanted to bounce back on that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it needs to be a public-private partnership. Industry alone, obviously, it doesn't have a mandate to impose regulation. I mean, if it would be the case, I mean, we would not be in the mess we are in the US with the Cernairs, the EPICs of the world that are fighting for interoperability standards and retaining the installed base precisely because of standards being different. So it needs to be a partnership, but still I want to insist on the fact, the example I've seen being on the tracking of medical products with, for instance, GS1 codes, or the interoperability standard, exchange standard, you mentioned FIRE, or HL7, they are all coming from the industry.
Thank you very much. Between Vaud and Genève, is there a standardization policy? At least start small, go big? Do you see things going in that way from the standpoint of Trust Valley?
Yes, what we can see at this time, it's the beginning of standardization in cybersecurity. And yes, there is, it's not standardization, it's more a label dedicated to cybersecurity only, not digital trust. And it's a local, regional label, but with federal influence, so it's great too. And the Confederation pushed it, and it was a startup who was boosted by the Tech for Trust. We discovered this label during the Tech for Trust, and what we can see also, it's other initiative, we are partner other initiative with the Trust Valley, for example, the SDI, so the Swiss Digital Initiative, who want to create a label at international level, and it's a Swiss label, so yeah, but I think it's really still the beginning, and what we see in European part to European Commission is the beginning of the story.
Okay, thank you. Just to remind to the audience, there's a Slido QR code here, so please feel free to engage in the conversation, to ask the questions you would like to ask to our distinguished panel. One thing I think, Sophie, evidence-based medicine is something which is really important to an insurance. Do you think that tools like the ones which are developed by Garmin could be useful? Garmin tends to say that the future of those trackers would be in prevention, but do you see the potential in evidence-based medicine?
So I think that we really have a role to play, not only in evidence-based medicine, but rather in value-based medicine. And perhaps just an explanation. We have a health system today that is based on quantity. So the more you deliver healthcare services, the more you get paid. And I think this is the biggest problem in the system, and that we have to change this into a system where we focus on the quality. And to build this system on quality, we need to have much more data, perhaps coming from devices, perhaps coming from other sources, but we really have to work on building data sources that help us to be sure where is the quality, where is the value brought to the patient, and that we pay for this value and not only for quantity.
Jon, do you think your technology could also be applied for the other part of the patient follow-up?
I completely agree with what Sophia said, and this is exactly what the focus should be. It should be really to identify the medical risk earlier, the evidence-based, because then the investment is much, much smaller, but the incentive should be there that it goes in this direction. And the science is there, the data is there. I think we just scratch on the surface what is possible. But my hope, and this is our dream and our vision, that we go more and more in this kind of risk prevention, and there are many programs already working with wearables. Is this AFib detection? Is it apnea? Is it sleep apnea? Is it other risk? And I think this is the future, and hopefully will make our life easier.
Okay, great. There's one question for you, Sophie, but first of all, I would like to come back to Antoine. Do you think the doctors trust AI? I mean, when they prescribe a drug, they know exactly how it works, the mechanism of action. What is the reaction towards AI, big data, all other buzz technologies, which, to my sense, seems to be a little bit black boxes?
I think it's right in the sense it can be black box, and that's the way it's treated by the FDA actually. So it's not totally set up how they will assess that in terms of regulation. So it might need this step before we can go and ask the doctor to trust it at some point. The authority also need to trust it. But in the end, it all comes to the value that it creates. If you want to have people trusting in something, you need to show them that it has a meaning. It brings some value for your patient. So if you have an AI tomorrow that can prevent 100% of the cancer, and you show it, even if it's a black box, I can tell you, everyone will be willing to trust it. So it's really about value, and it relates to also to standard and all. At some point, you need to reach a critical mass and show value, and everything will move a bit forward. But it's chicken and egg a bit. So you need to show the value, to bring people together, to build standard, build trust, and little by little it should move forward.
Jon or Arnaud, when you work with medical authorities, are you challenged with any AI construction, or?
I wanted to come back to 2 points that were made before. I mean, there is no alternative to AI. I mean, shortage of radiologists, shortage of pathologists, shortage of ICU experts, meaning that you need to actually triage the patient with artificial intelligence as you look at images and you analyze them. So I think it's going to happen. I don't think there will be a backlash from the medical profession because precisely there is a shortage of resource. So they need those tools. And then to the question of standards, I think you mentioned something that is even more important, that's the incentives. Alignment of incentives. I think this is where policymakers have the most critical role to play. I give you an example. If you are a doctor today, there is a high chance that you're going to prescribe hemodialysis in center because you own the center, right? And the patient is going to come and sit in a chair for 8 hours a day for 3 days a week. There is a better solution. You can do home hemodialysis at night, 5 days a week. The clinical outcome will be far superior. Problem, it's not reimbursed.
Indeed, the lack of reimbursement sometimes is a barrier of adoption for certain tools. So when there was you can ask some questions. There were 3 thumbs up, but there were only 2 questions. So the last guy who put the thumbs up could potentially ask a question too. Sophie, so from the Tech for EVA program. Is there a startup, a solution that you have integrated in Groupe Mutuel?
So it is really the goal when we support Tech Forever to be able to have new services, to have innovative services that we can add to our health insurance product. So this year, for example, we launched a new supplementary health insurance product that covers contraceptive pills. So it's not a startup from Tech Forever, but just meaning we are really wanted to go in this direction, and this is really the goal, that we can integrate the services in our product. So we are really working on it, and more probably next year.
Great, thank you. There's a question for you, Jan, about the use of Garmin in clinical trials. You partly addressed the question, but is it already for pure research or for clinically validated applications?
Both. It's a kind of combination. You can also search for third-party studies in Garmin, and then we created a database. There are around 500 research studies and clinical trials where you can see where Garmin wearables are used. You can also filter and say, okay, for different type of diseases and so on. So it's getting more and more. We don't want to be a medical device. That is important for us. So this is, we always, the difference is in Europe you can say, I don't want to be. In US, the problem is FDA say, now you are. That is a little bit a problem. But so we are always want to be a consumer device to keep the innovation, the cost, and the speed. But yes, more and more is used in clinical trials. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a question for you, Christian. Since you have experience in public and private hospitals, the level of digitalization, is it the same in those two environments? Are there some studies, some metrics?
There are definitely some different use cases around. Private hospital is not as the next private hospital in Switzerland, but referring to the ones who are part of the treatment of general insured patients, I think they're more or less on the same level. With regards to treating only private insured patients, I would say that private hospitals are behind the public hospitals today. And then, of course, we do have some very dedicated private hospitals in Switzerland who have a quite high level of digitalization. But these are sole institutions focusing strongly on improving their digitalization strategy. And therefore, I would say if you look on the broad majority of private hospitals in Switzerland is more or less on the same level as public hospitals are. I think there's a difference depending from the size of hospitals. So if you look on the bigger hospitals, the cantonal hospitals, you have a higher level of digitalization. If you look on the mid-size hospitals, the level becomes lower, and the lowest level is definitely the smaller hospitals because they're really not able to afford it.
Thank you very much. Last question from the public. The Swiss regulation, is it an enabler or a blocker?
The Swiss Federation is the blocker because we have different opinion leaders in the country. We have the cantonal voice, we have the governmental perspective, and I think the alignment of those is today lacking. So we would be able to improve, and I think in certain areas we need to have a governmental regulation to improve the system.
Great, and I think we're already reaching the end of this roundtable. Thank you very much. Yes, we shall we already take a picture with all the speakers, or at the end? We'll do it at the end, so you get back to the stage afterwards. But thank you very much. And I have the pleasure to